name is Juwayriyah, and I will be your host today, this evening for me anyway. And thank you so much for everybody who's joining in, who registered, who's attending, and taking time out. We have a very special webinar organized for you guys today. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Yousef Raza. I'm sure you guys saw his bio that we sent over to you guys in the emails. He is a psychiatrist who has had a lot of experience with counseling, whether it's mental health counseling or couples counseling. So, he sat in the room with lots of married people and dealt with all of their issues. But on top of that, he's also studied Islam classically, and he's been teaching, the religion, teaching the Quran as well. So he's got a fair bit of experience on that side as well. And so I'd like to welcome Dr. Yousef Raza on the screen now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Juwayriyah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Everybody, bismillah, alhamdulillah. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن خير الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. يقول سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بعد أن نقول أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذا سألك عبادي عني فإني قريب أجيب دعوة الداعي إذا دعان فليستجيبوا لي وليؤمنوا بي لعلهم يرشدون أحل لكم ليلة الصيام رفث إلى نسائكم هن لباس لكم وأنتم لباس لهن صدق الله العظيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما. اللهم أرنا حقيقة الأشياء كما هي. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. آمين يا رب العالمين. Okay, diving right into the topic. First up, thank you so much, Juwayriyah, for that introduction and for the invitation to the hosts at Quranic. MashaAllah, you guys are doing a wonderful job helping people connect to the Quran, and that's something of what we're trying to do today as well, connect to the Quran with respect to the topic of marriage. Also, thank you so much, all of you, for showing up, for being a part of the audience today. I hope whatever it is that I can say or deliver with respect to marriage in the Quran is of benefit and it makes sense. Of course, half an hour, there's only so much we can do in terms of covering ground, but we do as much as we possibly can. And then, of course, you're going to have, we will cover some ground in the question and answers as well. Right. The passage that we selected to discuss today. Now, there's those of you who are familiar would know that there's this phrase in the Quran that talks about a husband and wife and alludes to them as a garment for each other. Hunna libasul lakum wa antum libasul lahun. That they are addressing the Muslim men, that women or your wives are libas, garment, clothes for you, and you are a garment for them. Okay, so a lot of us are familiar with the use of this analogy of clothes for husband and wife, for a marital relationship. Now, what I wanted us to do is to look at that phrase, not just as the phrase in itself, but zoom out a little bit and look at the ayah in which it comes in, and zooming further out, the passage that we find that particular reference in. So this ayah, hunna libasul lakum wa antum libasul lahun, is part or a fragment of the ayah 187 of Surat al-Baqarah. Okay. A lot of you would know that this is the one ruku, the ayah comes in that ruku which talks about fasting. right? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyam. I believe ayah number 183 is where the passage starts from. So, point to be noted that this reference to husband and wife being libas for each other, being garments for each other, occurs in the ruku of fasting. Even more significant than that um, is the ayah that precedes this particular ayah. Ayah number 186. That is the ayah that I started off with, that I recited in the beginning. Whenever you ask anyone who has something of a relationship with the Quran and its translation, be it scholars, be it preachers, be it teachers, whatever, or just students of Quran who have put in some time with the Quran, and if you were to ask them about one ayah in the Quran that talks about the closeness of the human being to God, Allah and the human being being depicted in the closest possible way, then more often than not, you will find this particular ayah, ayah number 186, to be their response. That in this ayah, the way human and God closeness is mentioned, the way Allah and His qurb, His closeness to the human being, the way it is mentioned in this ayah, you will not find that degree of closeness in any other ayah, arguably. One or two other candidates, but the way the closeness. So ayah reads, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي أَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. Right? In the whole passage, the command for fasting has been given, why fasting is necessary, for taqwa, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن, its relationship to the Quran is mentioned, and then all of a sudden the subject seems to change towards this ayah which says that, Ya Rasulullah, O Prophet, when my ibad ask you regarding me, عني, وإذا سألك عبادي عني فإني قريب. When my ibad, my loving believers, servants, however you want to translate that, when they ask you regarding me, فَإِنِّي قَرِيب, most definitely I am near. And you would hear commentators mention that typically when this formulation is used in the Quran, that Ya Rasulullah, they ask you about this, قُل. Then the next word that comes in is the Prophet is told, قُل, say. In this formulation, in this ayah, the قُل is missing. The قُل is not there. Allah directly addresses the ibad asking about him. That is the degree of closeness. Right? So, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي is not followed by, O Messenger, tell them, Ya Rasulullah, they ask you this, O Messenger, they ask you this, tell them. The tell them is skipped. The tell them is skipped. Allah directly addresses the believers. فَإِنِّي قَرِيب, I am that close. I don't even need an intermediary to tell you how close I am. I am directly talking to you now. فَإِنِّي قَرِيب, I am very close. أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ, I respond to the call of the caller, to the petition of the petitioner. فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي, so they should respond to me and believe in me and trust me so that they may be guided. Right? So as close as human being and God can possibly get. Immediately next ayah. أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ الرَّفَثُ إِلَى نِسَائِكُمْ, sanctioned for you, permitted for you, halal for you, the nights of fasting, engaging in sexual intercourse with your wives. Between spouses, sexual engagement in the night of Ramadan is permitted. هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنَّ, they are a garment for you, and you are a garment for them. Again, interpreters of Quran emphasize there's a very strong opinion that the sequence matters, the order matters. So if something is coming before and something is coming after, there's a strong relationship between them. So if the ayah that talks about human beings' closeness to Allah, Allah's closeness to human being, the qurb between man and God, between human and God, is immediately followed by the most intimate ayah about a man-woman relationship, about a husband-wife relationship, then there is something definitely significant about that. And why is this significance? Why am I taking so much time in emphasizing this significance, this relationship, this how these two, how spirituality manifested in human and Allah's relationship, and sexuality manifesting human man-woman relationship, husband-wife relationship, there is an intimacy between these as well. And that was a concept very important to establish, precisely because some interpretations of spirituality, of religiosity, assume that sexuality, marriage, they are affairs of dunya, they are affairs of this world, and they are profane. They have nothing to do with the sacred. They have nothing to do with development or getting closer to Allah. That they are taking, that these are actions, these are, we will find extreme expressions of that these are vile, these are impure, these are etc., etc., etc. There is a demonization of sexuality in general that is associated with a lot of spiritual understanding, which the Quran takes a very strong stance against. That the spirituality that the Quran is advocating, the human to God relationship that the Quran is advocating, does not exclude human to human relationships, does not exclude man-woman relationships, does not exclude sexuality. That some form or some understanding of spirituality is being communicated in the Quranic message that is inclusive of, that accords a sacred position to sexual relationships. That the marital relationship has a sacred stand. How sacred? It is brought in affinity with the human-God relationship, this close. This close. And the context of the ayah itself, the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, again, they are being educated. The Quran is teaching them, and through them, the Quran is teaching us. Allah is bringing this very common notion of spirituality under criticism, under scrutiny here, which was manifested by some people at the time of the revelation of the Quran, where they felt that this month of fasting, this month of Ramadan, where we have to be self-control, discipline, no eating, drinking until evening. And so there was also this conception that abstinence from sexuality is to be carried throughout the month as well. These are holy nights. These are sacred nights. It is in one of these nights that Shahru Ramadan alladhi unzila fihi al-Quran. These are the nights in which the Quran was revealed. And so sex in the nights of Ramadan, that was something that they wouldn't want to, that they felt there was this sense that it's not allowed. Yet they couldn't hold themselves. They couldn't contain themselves. They went ahead and had sexual interactions with their spouses anyway, and they felt very guilty about that. They were carrying this guilt. The ayah goes on and says, you betrayed your own selves. عَلِمَ اللَّهُ أَنَّكُمْ كُنْتُمْ تَخْتَانُونَ أَنفُسَكُمْ. Allah knows that you've been betraying your own selves. Again, the choice of words is so beautiful. You're not betraying Allah, because Allah never instituted any such prohibition. There was no prohibition of this sort from Allah. The prohibition came from your own selves. This was a construction, this is an understanding of spirituality that you were carrying from somewhere else, not Quranic. Not Quranic. Wherever else it comes from, separate discussion, but it was there. You thought this was contrary to spirituality. And you were betraying yourself because you could not contain yourself. فَتَابَ عَلَيْكُمْ. So Allah is turning towards you with His mercy. وَعَفَا عَنْكُمْ. And He's letting it go. Whatever He's letting go, because He never forbade it to begin with. He's creating this ease for you. فَالْآنَ بَاشِرُوهُنَّ. So now go and engage sexually with them. It's a very interesting passage, this passage of fasting. As many times as Allah commands believers to fast, Allah commands believing men and women to engage in sexual relationships as well. Direct address, بَاشِرُوهُنَّ وَابْتَغُوا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. And seek what Allah has written for you. Again, seek what Allah has written for you, what Allah has prescribed for you, whatever Allah has ordained for you. Kataba from kitabat, from writing, right? Allah has written it for you. This isn't something that is written in the sense of it is an ordainment of a obligatory nature per se. I mean, there is that side to it, yes, but there is that which is biologically prescribed. This is a biological prescription. And a biological prescription for the continuity of the species, yes, for procreation, for children, for raising families, by all means. But also for the enjoyment of the human being, because part of that biological prescription is pleasure, is enjoyment, is satisfaction. وَابْتَغُوا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. Again, it is an encouragement. Go do it, go seek it. Because we also have this other sense, whatever is enjoyable, whatever is pleasurable, wherever we let our instincts loose, so to speak, let them live, is anti-spiritual, is anti-religious, is anti-God. That I'm not getting closer to God, I'm getting more and more distant from Him if I am engaged in anything that I enjoy or have fun. Pleasure being understood as an antithesis to spirituality. Here, the structuring is something that is ordained for you, that you're being encouraged to do, right? So why am I raising this point of significance? Because so many religious couples that I have spoken to, or individuals whose marital life is struggling, is faced with a lot of strife. There's distance between husband and wife. One or the other partner is distancing themselves, not just from physical relationships, but also emotionally engaging with their partner on spiritual grounds. On spiritual grounds. Why is our sexual interaction hampered? Well, because I have to pray tahajjud in the morning. And it won't be easy for me to shower or whatever, so abstain altogether. I have to fast. And it is better to fast than to engage in these activities. It is better to pray than to engage in such activities. So there is a distancing. There is a distancing. It is considered something that is barely allowed. What we see in this ayah very plainly, plain sense reading of the translation and the sequence, is that it is a very, very strong encouragement. An incident from the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sheds further light on this, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes home to Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, is asked, what is one of your most fascinating memories of Rasulullah? And she says everything about him was fascinating. She breaks down crying, and then she remembers this one incident. She says he came home to me and we got close, and we got close to the point that our skins touched each other. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam withdrew. And then he said, Aisha, if you will allow me. It is so incredible. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is head of the state. of Medina. He is the army general. He is the prophet, the greatest of prophets. And he's asking his wife if he has her permission. Her permission for what? If I have your permission to pray. The last few ayats of Ali Imran had been revealed to him, and he was so overwhelmed by them that he really, really wanted to pray. And he's the prophet, right? If he wants to pray, he should just go pray. No. He says, Aisha, if you give me permission, I want to pray. And she responded, your qurba is beloved to me, but that you pray to Allah is also beloved to me. So go ahead. She gives him permission, and then he goes to pray. Again, beautiful aspects of the hadith in the remaining part of the hadith as well, but we leave it at that. We leave it at that. Now, being raised in conservative, sexually very, very conservative households, this becomes an incredible problem because from childhood onwards, especially at teenage, Muslim children are given a very, very rigid sort of a sex education, if any education at all, which is comprised of usually a single line that this is not allowed, and it is haram. Don't even think about it. One of the people that I was working with, a married lady who, on going to school, was told by her father very, very strictly that if I ever find out that there is anything that is between you and any other guy, I am going to kill you. I am going to shoot you. And he wasn't kidding. And that particular lady internalized that. And of course, all the other ways in which sexual morality was enforced, such that which is so instinctive, natural within every man and woman was suppressed, quenched, stifled to the nth degree. That when such men and women, such boys and girls grow up and get married, something that they were then, of course, required to do, and now that they're married, they're expected to engage sexually. But for the longest time, since their puberty, ever before that, it is something that they're always, that is always demonized in front of them. So for years, decade, at least 2 decades, it is something that has been demonized in front of them. And when they are in that relationship, they have a difficulty performing on request, so to speak. They're expected to now be sexually active, not just active, go all the way and satisfy each other. And it's incredibly problematic for something that they haven't been even allowed to think about. And so there are troubles, there are problems, there are difficulties in performance, anxiety, performance anxieties, frigidities, which results in emotional distancing, which results in taking on these hierarchies. And what hierarchies? Oh, this is religiously and spiritually not even that great of an activity anyways. I want to pray. I want to recite Quran. I want to fast. I'd rather do that. So a lack of ability or a lack of progress, if you will, in the sexual domain and the relationship domain. Of course, relationship is not just sexual, but context of the ayat that we chose, there was so much to it that they couldn't make any progress there. They couldn't improve there. So where do we improve instead? Let's improve on the musalla, on the prayer mat. Let's improve there. And when you go to that Quran and you go to that musalla, and Allah is asking you to go back to your spouse, make that relationship work, progress therein, that part is ignored. and situation in the marriage goes from bad to worse. Emotional distances result, arguments, frustrations, emotional frustrations. So many times that I've seen this in my practice. People who are having sexual difficulties because of their background, because of how they were raised in their marriage, become emotionally frustrated. They find that emotional satisfaction outside of their marriage. They are more satisfied talking to somebody other than their husband or other than their wife. And there, that emotional connection is developed first. And once that emotional connection is developed, one thing leads to another, as they say, and then there is marital infidelity. Ironically, the spouses who are unable to perform with each other are performing just fine outside of that marriage. So the very sexual morality that we were trying to enforce by that strict moralizing just around teenage for men and women results in sexual misconduct, immorality, when it comes to married adult couples. Infidelity, no less. So just a few comments on the phrase "Hunna libasul lakum wa antum libasul lahun." They are your garment and you are their garment. What does libas do? What do garments do? What do clothes do? Foremost, they are for protection, right? Protection against the cold, against the heat. It is a protection. Libas protects you in the psychological sense from your own instincts, from being driven by your instincts into places which are anti-community, anti-civilization, anti-society, not just anti-religion, but anti-civilization. So your libas protects you from that deviation, from being driven off the cliff, if you will. A marital relationship does that. A husband does that for a wife. Wife does that for a husband. It helps you. The libas talks about it results in a protection from being waylaid, from being your vulnerabilities. And they're not just sexual. Thank you for bringing that up. Your other deficiencies in your personality, in your spirituality. What does the libas do? It covers that which you're not all that proud of. You cover for each other. Your libas hides your scars, your wounds, wherever you've been hurt. And it gives a room for those wounds and scars to heal. There is a therapeutic function in being covered and remaining covered. Libas has a therapeutic function. Relationships have a therapeutic function. There is so much about us in our childhood, in our teenage, in our premarital life that hurts us, that breaks us up, right? So that brokenness requires covering, requires something to cover it so it can be healed, something that can provide it healing. A libas provides that healing. So many of us enter into relationships broken, whether it's manifesting as depression, as anxiety, as relationship issues, challenges with our parents, between siblings, friends, whatever the case may be. The libas that is marriage, the spouse, offers a chance to heal. That you express that brokenness, are accepted with that brokenness, and therefore that brokenness can heal. There is so much about the libas that allows to do that. Very quickly before I close, in Surat A'raf, beginning, when the incident of Adam alayhi salam with Iblis is detailed, and how Adam and Hawa are expelled as a result from paradise, Allah mentions the sending down of libas at that point as well. What does it do? Yuwari sawatikum. It covers you. So the covering of this brokenness, of the shame, that which embarrasses you. But it also has another function. It has a function of warisha, makes you beautiful. A couple of ayat later, again in Surat A'raf, the word libas is replaced with a synonym for it, which is zina, adornment, beauty. So libas is also, it doesn't just have a function of covering, and it doesn't have the function of just covering or hiding. It has a positive function of beautifying, of adorning. Marriage has that as well. Spouses do that for each other. They make you look beautiful. They make you look beautiful. And this is a desexualized beauty that libas offers, that marriage offers, that goes around and protects, again, that the other zina as well, and that which is sexual as well. So it is a very intricately related, complex dynamic that that marriage offers. Again, I could not go into a lot of other details in this context, but I felt these were important to get across. And that is it from my side. If وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. If there's any questions, please do feel free to put the questions out there. I believe there are certain questions here. I think our host has lost connection. Juwayriyah, are you back, or are you? No? In that case, I will jump to the questions myself. Okay, so there is a question. How do they heal you, though? Very good question. There's a lot of ways that marriage heals, and we will find this. The most simplest expression, the most simple manifestation of healing would be in somebody has recurrent depression, anxiety, let's say. A lot of times we have seen that if their marriage is a healthy, loving relationship, then that depression and anxiety becomes a thing of the past. Because that depression and anxiety is coming from a place of not being understood, not being loved, not being cared for, is accompanied with these feelings, these fears of abandonment, is accompanied with these inferiority feelings. And when another human being gives you that significance that you are my special, that the place that you have in my life nobody else does, and through words and actions gives that significance to their spouse, then that significance hits home. And the deprivation, the gap, the void inside is to a considerable degree filled. So in the simplest explanation, that's one way of healing. Another way of healing from a marriage or within a marriage is that a marriage necessarily goes through a rough patch. Marriage is not an automatic, blissful contract that once you have it, it's a happily ever after. For a marriage to actually become mature, and of course, one of my seminars, I'm going to, the courses that you see the link for, we're going to detail this stage by stage, but very briefly, every mature relationship has to go through a time period of conflict, a time period of difficulty. In that time period of conflict and difficulty, you exhibit a lot of that brokenness. You exhibit a lot of those internal conflicts, deficiencies of personality, deficiencies of development. They're expressed, they may be, if they are appropriately managed in that relationship by the other spouse, if they are tolerated, understood, accepted, guided, navigated, then through the development of mature communication between spouses, the healing process ensues. In a lot of relationships, we carry baggage from previous traumas, whether that was with our parents or siblings or other relationships we may have had. We transfer that baggage, we carry that baggage with us into our current relationship, current marriage. And we play that out. So a lot of times our spouse is having to face the anger that we harbor towards somebody from our past. And now, if there is that cognizance within that relationship, that forgiveness, that understanding, then the space for healing is created. Then that space for healing is created. But again, it is this very dangerous expression that does take place in the relationship. And a lot of people have this myth in their heads that a perfect marriage is always happy. You're always attracted to each other. You're always, you're always in love. And then when that conflict phase ensues, which naturally should ensue for a mature relationship, then they start developing these ideas. Oh my God, we're out of love. Oh my God, we don't love each other. We have fallen out of love. And then there's this whole cycle that goes on in the head. Oh, if I'd married somebody else, maybe now I love somebody else. If I don't love this person, why should I be with them? Am I being a hypocrite? No, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I have to express what I feel what I express, da, 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 da. And things go from bad to worse. Things go from bad to worse. Walaikum assalam, Juwayriyah is back.
Yes, sorry. It was raining here and I lost my connection momentarily. I had my freak out moment, but alhamdulillah, I'm back. But now that I am, I was just thinking maybe we can go through some questions that have been sent in through the chat box.
Sure, I did address, I think, one or two of them. How do marriages heal? A asked me to elaborate on that. I think I tried. I did some of that. And then there's, I was pretty much working on that.
Right, perfect. Okay. So there's a few in the chat box. I don't know if this was the one you're referring to, but it says, for those who may not experience attraction to the opposite sex but are pursuing marriage solely to ensure they're following what is ordained as halal by Allah and save themselves from wrongdoing, how would you recommend they navigate the intimacy aspect of marriage that wasn't part of their biological prescription?
Okay. I'm not, so I think that question, I'm trying to see where it is.
It's if you go to ask a question.
It's in the question and answers, or it's in the...
No, it's in the ask a question box at the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So just to reiterate,
I got it. For those, I got it. Yeah. Biological prescription. So what I'm assuming, and actually there is not much to assume here, the question is with respect to homosexuality, that there is a strong sense, a strong experience of being a homosexual, and a person who has that particular orientation enters into a marriage and is married obviously to the member of the opposite sex, but is not attracted to a member of the opposite sex. I don't think there is a generic response to these for all of the cases that I'm currently attending to. All of the people that I am consulting or who are working with me, consulting me as a psychiatrist for this particular issue, all of them manifest their marriage, or they experience their marriage and homosexuality in a very different way. I cannot map one case onto another because there is absolute homosexuality, there is bisexuality, there is particular expressions of homosexuality in thought, not in emotion. There's a whole spectrum. Again, I don't want to digress into details there, but I would strongly recommend that it isn't something that is easy to navigate. From the people that I have worked with and spoken to, it is an incredible challenge. It is an incredible challenge, but they have done it very well. Very religious, spiritual people maintained their sexual relationships with their spouses, not having been attracted to them at all and being attracted to their own gender, and spent decades of marriage that way. Not without difficulty, not without suffering, but nevertheless, it is being done. It has been done. How a specific person will do it, I would strongly advocate that that specific person seek professional help. Um, Sometimes the other spouse knows. Sometimes the spouse does not know. The other spouse is not okay with it, right? So I, I personally will struggle to give out a generic recommendation. It is going to be different for everybody how it's going to
Right.
work.
Yeah, so the kind of answer is it's a case by case basis, and professional help is needed. For anybody who is interested, Dr. Yousef does run a counseling service called Telepsychiatry. I'll let you know about it after the course, inshallah. There's another question that just caught my eye on the chat. So, Assalamu alaikum, I'm a newly reverted, I'm a new revert, and I'm wondering, how do I get married in Islam? I'm aware of nikah only to the extent as a legal process, but would like to be aware of how two Muslims build a connection that causes them to decide on marriage, since it's foreign to me that there's no boyfriend or girlfriend step rightfully in this process. I would basically like to know how we fall in love and establish that romantic connection.
Okay, so this is something that as a community we are actively struggling with. So as it used to happen, traditionally, marriages were arranged. Even in childhood and teenage, people would know who they're going to get married to when they grew up. They were engaged, so to speak. As we are entering into the late 20th, early 20th, and early 21st century, that is no longer the case. Marriages within families, two cousins, arranged in childhood, teenage, no longer takes place. A large majority of the population, whether in the East or the West, Muslim or non-Muslim, would then meet people at school, university, marriages, social gatherings, start talking to each other, start liking each other, expressing their liking for each other, get talking more, go on dates, and establish a relationship, and then look to get married. But then, as you mentioned, that isn't something that is sanctioned. Although it is still done, it isn't something that is really sanctioned. However, and we are now a little going towards the what is allowed and what is not allowed aspect of it, but there is a significant scholarly consensus, or consensus of a significant proportion of scholars, that says that it is okay for people prior to their marriage to interact in a decent manner, in a reasonable manner in order to get to know each other better and fall in love. Should that be the condition necessarily? I'm not exactly sure. But definitely to get to know each other better in order to consider whether they want to get married to each other or not. There's only so much you can know about each other prior to marriage. A lot changes thereafter. Nevertheless, there needs to be as much assurance as is reasonable in those interactions. At the end of the day, you're engaging with non-mahrams, men and women, professionally, academically, in stores, in Ubers, in everything. But to not engage with them if you're interested in the prospect of marriage, that does seem quite ridiculous. So there is a room for a reasonable interaction. It is even recommended by a lot. So there should be some arrangement for it. There's matrimonial websites that have developed. There's the chaperones facilitate the process as long as you know your boundaries, as long as you have a mutual agreement on what boundaries you're going to conform with during those interactions. That's also very important. There should be that process should convene in some way or the other.
So
I hope that helps.
basically, take a middle path, be reasonable about it. It kind of reminds me of what my husband said to me when we were getting to know each other. No, actually, afterwards, he told me, he said, I didn't fall in love with you, but whilst I was getting to know you, I knew I had the potential to fall in love with you after I married you. So you guys,
That's
you kind of, yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up, Juwayriyah. I will say this much: this notion of falling in love, this is pretty tricky. And the way it is represented in popular media, songs, fairy tales, real life generally has that and doesn't have that at the same time. So we have to be very, very careful how we go for this. But again, not the room to elaborate on this. I feel bad for
Right.
saying that for more elaboration, join the
No,
course. But yeah, this myth of romantic love really deserves to be understood for what it is and what it is not, and how
right.
it relates to a relationship.
But while we still have you, there's another question that I just saw that's kind of pertinent to what you're talking about in your talk when it comes to spouses being protection for each other, just like garments are. Lareid is asking, my spouse will sometimes speak poorly about me to his family to make his sisters happy. Can you emphasize the repercussions of this? He speaks to them not really realizing I can hear and say things that are very hurtful.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that question, Larib. When it comes to managing your marital relationship and your extended family, or your sisters, your mother, wife, or the other way around, your husband, very sensitive territory to tread. Again, we lose the priority of the marital relationship in this process if we give these preferences explicitly, that my sisters come first, if that is an absolute declaration, or my mother comes first and you don't, you have no space or you have no room. Now, speaking poorly in this context, what that will do, the disrespect, how that will impact the wife, and then naturally results in difficulty for that wife to be a fulfilling wife, or be a wife wholeheartedly, not just as a wife, but as a mother. When a woman is disrespected in a marriage and expected to perform her responsibilities as a mother perfectly, it is absolutely ridiculous. There is so much that is taken away. We have this popular phrase, you can't serve from an empty cup, and being constantly disrespected makes the task of mothering very difficult, which is challenging as it is. There's mothering is not easy, fathering is not easy, and then to not be in a good marital space with each other, this is this is where diseases grow. This is a family, this is that toxic environment in which children are injected with personality disorders, proclivities towards depression and anxiety for the rest of their lives. An unhappy household is a breeding ground for mental illnesses, for children for generations to come. We have this conception of transgenerational trauma. So if this disrespect, this speaking poorly, is happening consistently, if this undermining is happening consistently, then it is not just happening to that wife, it is happening to the mother, to a future mother. And it is going to be passed on to the children one way or the other. It is going to be passed on to their children. So many of the patients that I have talk about the toxicity of their grandparents towards their parents and how they're still carrying that with them. The trauma ceases, the impact lasts. Having said that, as individual human beings, we do have this capacity to confront our suffering in the most dignified manner possible, such that either we change the situation in which that suffering is being afflicted upon us, and that would mean in certain cases stepping out of a toxic relationship, if that is what it is. Or if that is not possible, or if it is not toxic to that extent, then to carry yourself from the resources that are within you as a person through other people's help, siblings, friends, own family, therapist, perhaps, teachers, mentors, to become that stronger person that despite a persistent, demeaning, disrespectful attitude that you're subjected to, you do not let that pass on to the other dimensions of your life and your children and grandchildren as a result. Difficult to do, not at all easy, but we have to be very careful in saying that experiencing trauma or toxicity does not necessarily mean that we respond maladaptively. We respond in the form of illnesses and we pass that on to others. There is a space within each human being for responding, even although it's more difficult, but responsibly and heal despite that. Okay, so yes, it is. But I would also say this: if the husband is speaking poorly, that is a sign of his own values, his own personality, of diseased family, and a diseased relationship as well. What is it that we can do in all of these areas? It's never in isolation. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much. That really did elaborate on the question. And again, thank you so much to our speaker, Dr. Yousef, for taking the time out to answer our questions, to educate us a bit. And yes, we're really, really delighted to have you on, Quranic. And inshallah, in the future, I can see us having multiple webinars about so many different topics that, you know, your expertise as a psychiatrist can shed some light on. So I'll let you all go now, unless you want to say something. I saw you. Yeah.
Thank you, Juwayriyah. I just wanted to say thank you to you and to all of the people at Quranic. Jazakumullah khairan for the opportunity, for the audience, for your questions. And I would be happy to be back, inshallah. No problem at all.
Right, inshallah, on popular demand.